Good evening, friends. Welcome, everybody. My name is Sue Joyner, and I feel like I'm still not quite loud enough. I'll just keep talking till I feel like I am loud enough. There we go. My name is Sue Joyner. I'm the senior minister here, and I am so delighted to welcome you tonight. And at the same time, I have a massive apology for the temperature in here. We've been running the swamp cooler for several days trying to cool it off, and this is what we get. So I'm deeply sorry. Thank goodness the speakers will be so captivating. You will soon forget how warm it is in here. I do apologize. Tonight is really something I've looked forward to for so long. Demetria Martinez and Glenn Thamert are heroes, and I'm so excited to hear a piece of their stories. I think that's one of the things we forget to do is make time to hear the stories after an event. So and on this anniversary, it's just a real privilege to be here tonight. So thank you all for joining us. I want to just mention a few things. If anyone needs this translated English to Spanish, you can see Yusti in the back, and they have a fancy little piece of equipment to give you that you can use. And then if you're joining us via Zoom, you can write your questions in the chat, and we have a God mic that will send those questions down here to us. And so after Glenn and Demetria have spoken for about 40 minutes, we will have a time for Q&A. So if you do have questions, let me know. I will come running out with a microphone. And then when we're finished here, I invite you to join us in the fellowship hall where it's slightly cooler. And you can buy Demetria's books there. And also Sarah Keeney is here somewhere. There she's in the back. She has cards that were made by Emma. And Emma was in Sanctuary here from 2017 to 2018. Okay. So she was in Sanctuary at the Quaker Meeting House. So feel free to contact Sarah if you're interested in that. I also want to welcome, a special welcome to Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb, who is joining us from the Bay Area and a longtime supporter of Sanctuary for many, many decades. So thank you for being here. So I'm going to get out of the way because you came here to hear Glenn and Demetria. Let's hear their stories. Thank you both.
Thank you. Wow, what an unbelievable evening. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. In this veil of tears, as we Catholics like to say, it's so good to have something to celebrate. And so again, just thank you so much. My story begins with the fateful day in 1986 when I got a call from Glenn, a Lutheran minister, saying, "Have I got a story for you?" At the time, I was covering religion for the Albuquerque Journal and the National Catholic Reporter. Glenn explained that as part of the Sanctuary movement, he was helping bring 2 Salvadoran women refugees to safety in the United States. He cited Scripture as the inspiration for his activities and that of the largely faith-based movement. "You were once strangers in the land of Egypt. Therefore, you must welcome the stranger. Whatsoever you do to the least of these, you do unto me." The 2 Salvadoran women had been raped by soldiers in that country's US-funded civil war. They were pregnant and hoped to give up their children for adoption. They were part of a stream of thousands of Central Americans fleeing brutal dictatorships and death squads backed by US tax dollars in the name of fighting communism. Many fled persecution because of their involvement with base communities, comunidades de base, from which emerged liberation theology. Liberation theology held that it was not God's will that they live in abject poverty at the mercy of the few powerful rich. Liberation theology would influence Archbishop Oscar Romero, gunned down by death squads for questioning the status quo, and he was not alone. So it was that Glenn and I and 2 other churchmen met the women in Juarez. A 15-year-old coyote, a young woman, brought the women to El Paso where we met them at Casa Annunciation. We drove back north in 2 vehicles. I had my reporter's notebook in hand and took copious notes. I witnessed, wide-eyed, the courage of the churchmen as they transported the women past a Border Patrol vehicle, as well as the courage of 2 women suffering from morning sickness and determined that their unborn children should have a decent life. In the end, I didn't write a news story. I didn't want immigration to trace the women's whereabouts to hospitals where they would give birth. However, inspired by the fact that the women were due in December, I wrote a poem, Nativity, which I'll read now. Nativity for 2 Salvadoran women, 1986 to 1987. Your eyes, large as Canada, welcome this stranger. We meet in a Juarez train station where you sat for hours, your offspring blooming in you like cactus fruit, dresses stained where breasts leak, panties in purses tagged Hecho en El Salvador. Your belts, like equators, mark north from south, borders I cannot cross, for I am a North American reporter. Pen and notebook, the tools of my tribe, distance us, though in any other era I might press a stethoscope to your wombs, hear the symphony of the unborn, finger forth infants to light, wipe afterbirth, cut cords. You tell me it is impossible to raise a child in that country. Sisters, I am no saint, just a woman who happens to be a reporter who happens to be a woman, squat in a forest, peeing on pine needles, watching you vomit morning sickness, a sickness infinite as the war in El Salvador, a sickness my pen and notebook will not ease. Tell me, ¿por qué están aquí? How did you cross over? In my country, we sing of a baby in a manger, finance death squads, how to write of this shame, of the children you chose to save. You tell me it is impossible to raise a child in that country. A North American reporter, I smile. You tell me you are due in December. We nod, knowing what women know. I shut my notebook, watch your car rock through the Gila. A canoe hangs over the windshield like the beak of an eagle. Babies turn in your wombs, summoned to Belen to be born. In 1987, I learned that I, along with Glenn, had been indicted for our so-called crimes. I was facing 25 years in prison and $1.25 million in fines for conspiracy against the U.S. government in connection with transporting so-called illegal aliens and encouraging their entry. Glenn faced similar charges. And I was stunned to learn that the government had somehow obtained my poem, Nativity, in an attempt to use it against me. Our indictments immediately received national and international attention. The writer, Norman Mailer, called Gloria Steinem and said, "You have to do something in Ms. Magazine about this story." Our friend Mark Rudd told Allen Ginsberg about our case, and he flew out on his own nickel and packed the Chemo Theater for a fundraising reading for our cause. And even Bonnie Raitt came out and did a benefit concert for us. In the summer of 1988, we went to trial in the downtown federal courthouse. Our lawyers' arguments were twofold: that my news gathering activities were covered by the First Amendment, freedom of speech and of the press. Glenn's defense rested on the fact that in 1986, then Governor Tony Anaya had declared New Mexico a sanctuary state, and that Glenn believed this protected his activities. Indeed, he had carried a copy of Anaya's proclamation in his pocket on the trip. My witnesses range from news editors and investigative reporters to photographers and priests, as well as a rabbi, Lynn Gottlieb, with whom I had often shared coffee and long conversations about Judaism and social justice. Lynn electrified the courtroom. She testified that she had seen my reporter's notes. She then went on to testify about the New Testament story of Christ's birth. Soon the packed courtroom gasped in amazement. A Jewish rabbi giving a brilliant Talmudic-like interpretation of the Christian story. And as if from heaven, the audience broke into laughter, the first sign to me that I was not destined to 25 years in prison. Toward the end of the trial, the mystery writer, Tony Hillerman, took the stand. My attorney, Tova Indritz, had argued that during the trip I had remained in a vehicle separate from the women as a way of maintaining a proper reporter's distance. But Hillerman, who had taught journalistic ethics at UNM, had a different take on things. He said that had he been my editor, he would have told me that I should do my share of the driving. The prosecutor's jaw dropped. Mr. Hillerman, don't you know that driving illegal aliens in this country is a crime? And Tony, without missing a beat, said, I didn't know that yesterday when I drove my roofer home. The courtroom exploded in laughter. Even Judge Conway could not contain himself as he banged his gavel, laughing. I knew then for sure that Glenn and I had won. The United States government could not stand up to such love and laughter that reigned in the courtroom. The next day, the jury filed in the courtroom. We all stood up, and the words, not guilty, rang out over and over and over again. That was 36 years ago today. We were free. Thank you.
Love you. At a July convention in Milwaukee, two politicians who want to be in the White House repeated the words illegal aliens. There is no such thing as an illegal alien, since no human being is illegal. Aliens are ones from outer space, not us. The American way for most of us is to welcome the stranger, something that we can read in the Bible. Jesus and his parents once became strangers, refugees who had to flee from political persecution. Many Christians forget this. I helped two women refugees whose pictures are in the other room, Ines and Cecilia. Refugees from El Salvador in 1986, and I was told by a federal attorney, William Lutz, that I had to be indicted with 9 felony counts for such a horrible act. I spent 3 weeks of my life in a federal trial. There were legal fees of $100,000 for 3 wonderful women attorneys, Alice from here in Albuquerque, Nancy from Tucson, and Karen from San Francisco. Donors paid this amount for me, donors from all over the country, for which I am most thankful. August 2nd is the 36th anniversary of our acquittals. I was blessed by Governor Anaya and his sanctuary state proclamation, which became my legal defense during my trial, a defense that my jury understood and then voted to acquit me, setting me free to live my life as a father for my children. Here with us tonight, Ella and Eusti. For me, Jesus' words to love our neighbor is to be taken seriously. Churches in many states are still providing sanctuary for refugees, protecting them, those who need assistance rather than having their lives ruined by being deported. This very church in which we are meeting tonight is and has been a place of sanctuary. Countless mothers, fathers, and children are refugees worldwide, as we hear in the news every day, ones who are fleeing violence and threats of death. Politicians who want to deny the legal right of political asylum are acting illegally. The two who spoke at the Wisconsin convention in July have even said they will deport millions of undocumented immigrants, something that would ruin their lives and threaten our economy in many ways. We people of faith and others will have to protest those actions if they would happen. In 1986, the civil war in El Salvador, which the U.S. supported, resulted in the death of 65,000 people and caused 750,000 others to be refugees. Today, our country is again doing something similar in Palestine. People of faith and others are protesting this waste of human life and property. I watch that on Democracy Now! Monday through Friday. In 2013, when we celebrated our 25th anniversary at the Peace Center here in Albuquerque, another man who was indicted and then convicted for helping refugees, the Presbyterian pastor, Reverend John Fife of Tucson, wrote to Dimitri and me saying, quote, "Now we live in the midst of the latest government atrocity and systemic violation of human rights, not just in the borderlands, but in communities across the nation. Thousands of poor migrant workers, women and children, have died cruel deaths in the borderlands as a direct result of a tragically failed border enforcement strategy. In time, juries refuse to convict because the people have learned about the injustice and persecution the government represents. At that point, history turns. The government recognizes that change is inevitable, and social justice moves forward another step. Dimitri and Glenn's victory in court was the moment that history turned and the quest to end the deportations of refugees to El Salvador, other countries, became inevitable. The victory in the courtroom could not have been won without all of you gathered and of many others who organized, drove refugees north on the new Underground Railroad, and prayed and wrote letters and all of the actions that make up a movement for social change. So, have a joy-filled fiesta on this historic anniversary. We join you in profound gratitude for Dimitri and Glenn's courage and witness during the trial in 1988. Bless all of you who supported them during that time and were a part of the sanctuary movement." End quote. My hope and prayer as one who was once afraid of spending 45 years of my life in a federal penitentiary in Texas, is that we will all work for change so that peace and justice will prevail, not death and destruction of more broken lives. The Statue of Liberty, by which many of my ancestors came from Germany, is and has been a beacon of hope for me and millions of others. My life and witness is to be a compassionate human being who honors others in this broken world. Peace with justice is the answer for a livable world. We must be willing to stand up and speak out when we see injustice in this world of ours. I am a very grateful person who has been given much by many caring people. Thank you all for celebrating freedom with Demetria and me tonight. Bless you.
Thank you both for sharing your story. I have utmost admiration for you. And I know what it meant to our church to know people like you had gone before us when we took the step to be a sanctuary church. So we're grateful for you, for the activism, and for your willingness to share your story tonight. So now we're going to open it for folks who have questions. I've got a microphone. I will come to you. So raise your hand if you'd like to. And then also, if there's some from Zoom, we'll be piping them down in here. You can't, I'm sorry, that's the other thing. We're trying to make it cool and then you can't hear. Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay. Mac, do you have a question? Okay.
Thank you. I applaud both of you for the work you're doing. And I just have really one question for each of you. I hope you'll be able to answer. Looking at what's happening in the world today, and you mentioned Palestine and so forth, what would you say for each of you is your overarching focus? And what would you call on our community to be most concerned about today?
Go ahead. Yeah? I was with a peace delegation in Palestine 2013 led by a Canadian priest, Bob Holmes. We had two from Australia, one from Britain, myself, and then Bob and another from Canada. I still have very painful memories of seeing persecution of Israeli soldiers with young men. My kid, Yusti, back in the back there, was in Palestine in April for 3 weeks and saw even more persecution by settlers. This whole thing that our tax dollars are paying for hurts me. I wish Biden would have not done that, resulting in the death of many, many thousands and destruction of Gaza. I guess my hope and prayer and what I can do as a citizen is to speak out. I wrote Vice President Kamala Harris today and asked that she not follow Biden with those policies relative to Gaza. And I'm thankful for Jewish folk, Jewish Voice for Peace, like you, Lynn, standing up, raising your voice. And I would imagine all of us who want peace and justice and dignity for human beings in Palestine, in Sudan, in Yemen, in so many places in our world, we need to speak up, act out.
Question. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that question. For me, what my struggle, I mean that in a good sense, a positive sense, as an activist has been to ask myself, you know, what's my calling? Where do I feel that I can make a difference? And I'm not someone who would maybe necessarily travel overseas to make a statement or whatever, though there's God knows there's a place for that in the sense that what Glenn has done. But I've always, asked the universe, how can I make a difference here locally? And I ended up working for a number of years on Saturday mornings with Los Jardines Institute. Richard's here, the co-director, and every Saturday I showed up and we would pull weeds and we'd harvest cherry tomatoes, half of them in our mouths, half of them in the bag. And what Jardines is all about is providing organic food for people who otherwise can't afford it. And then our political work involves environmental justice, addressing a range of environmental justice issues. And so that's where I found my niche as an activist. And so I think all of us just have to kind of, look around and say, where am I called to be involved? Do I go to Gaza? That's important. Do I go to Jardines and weed? That's important. And all kinds of ways within those two, extremes, all the ways in between that we can get involved. Is it becoming a great teacher? Is it, there's just a million ways. But I would just say that, for me, it was really about searching and asking the question, where can I, in my own way, make a difference and stay positive and not burn out, and not feel like what's the use? And I think what Jardines has brought me, and other areas that I've been involved in, other organizations, is I realized that to be an activist, to try to make a difference, not only can we not burn out, but we also have to create community, and that community is what nurtures us and enables us all to put one foot in front of the other in very difficult times.
I'm ready to run to you. Oh, thank you. All right. Thank you, Myra.
My name is Myra. I am related to one of the speakers, and I live part-time with both of them. It's a blessing, has been, ever since I've been part of this. I was in the sanctuary movement 36 years ago. Where are the people who were my age? Okay, come on, raise some more hands. Let me see. No, the ones now who are in their 20s or 30s. Ah, see, I heard you. Okay. I work with folks in that generation, and my bosses don't know it, but I'm a short timer now. So I have started speaking. So my question is, how? How do I speak to people who say, oh, I just saw on the news that an illegal alien can get $13,000 a month in EBT benefits? I mean, I don't even hear that they came here to have their babies anymore. That's what the big thing was in the 80s. How do we start this conversation? We've got to be talking about it because these 20 and 30-year-olds are buying this. So help me.
I mean, I think a lot of 20s and 30-year-olds, I don't know if it's them who aren't listening. I'm wondering if it's us not listening to them. I think there's a lot that's going on. I miss a lot of it because I don't do Facebook. I don't do, quote unquote social media. But, when I do plug in and see what's going on, I'm really feeling, and I know what you're saying, Myra, I know exactly what you're saying, but what I'm feeling is a lot of hope now, particularly now that Kamala has stepped up. Wow, all of a sudden, it's social media and Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion. I mean, you know, it's like, what world is this? You know, I don't, you know, this makes no sense to me. And all of a sudden, it's like I'm having to educate myself, because there are a generation of young people who will be stepping up, and people like you, me, all of us need to be ready to take their hands and say, hey, you know, let me show you, you know, how can we educate each other? You know, what can we learn? How can we pull together? And so I think it's an interesting moment in history as far as a coming together of the generations. I really believe that's happening. But thank you. That was a great question.
I live in Jemez Springs that has a lot of retired folk like a lot of us here tonight. And occasionally coming to the Bodhi Manda Zen Center, the Buddhist community in our land, in Jemez Springs, I do connect with younger folks and I listen as we need to do. I have a hero kid, Eusti, who challenged me with LGBTQIA realities. And I think being born in 1944, this really caused me to get into therapy to work through some of the biases I had, and have, thanks to Eusti, worked my way through. Demetra used to work for the National Catholic Reporter, and she sent me a link a couple of days ago about Annunciation House in El Paso. Raise your hands if you've heard of Annunciation House. Great. I would invite you, if you have children, grandchildren, friends, neighbors, to invite them to go down and volunteer like I have with my children. A week, 2 weeks, whatever, a couple of days, a weekend, and personally be around folks who have been through a lot. I cannot imagine myself walking from El Salvador, from Guatemala, somehow from Haiti, Colombia, Venezuela, all of these countries, even the Middle East, some are showing up at Annunciation House. And I think just being present with others who've had such a painful journey is one way to teach. So there's my invitation for you, your family, your grandkids. I think by personally getting involved, people can feel it, live it, and change some of the stuff inside of us.
My name is Cesar, and I'm a volunteer with Los Jardines Institute. I would like to thank you for your activism. I got to experience the sanctuary movement in the mid-'90s in San Francisco, and it's for people like you who committed to do the work. We continue to have that mentality that we need to help others and help especially immigrants. So my question is, since 1996, we haven't got a comprehensive immigration reform, and during the time that you were doing the work that you were doing, continue to have a very complex immigration system back in the 80s, back in the 90s, and even today. So I wondered if you have a new perspective looking at over 30 years of what is the immigration state of affairs, as well as an immigration policy, because over 30 years we haven't got a comprehensive immigration reform, and yet we continue to have to deal with the immigration of, you know, millions of people around the globe.
Thank you, Cesar, and thanks for being here. Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the ways that the conversations needs to really go in, which, you know, we tried to emphasize in the 80s, was root causes. You know, in what ways does U.S. policy create streams of refugees? You know, and what can we do to ensure that what can we do to work toward those kinds of policy changes and raising that kind of awareness? You know, and then part and parcel with that is coming up with a decent immigration reform, something that is fair and just. And, but I think, I mean, it's, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I just, year after year after year, I see how the United States, through its policies, I mean, El Salvador was a disaster, millions of dollars a day at one point. And we wonder why people are fleeing fleeing death squads, that we're paying for. So that's just my initial impression. And so, maybe one of you has a better way to answer that, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, it concerns me that political asylum, the legal right for that, is being pushed aside, buried. And if you and I were in Guatemala, Salvador, one of these countries where persecution and death threats and really ugly things by gangs is happening, we would need to be able to come to this country, hit the border, turn ourselves in, and apply for political asylum. But that's really a difficult thing these days. DACA, 500,000 people, that's not gone through. And I wish that Biden would have pushed more on that, and hopefully Kamala will too. Where Yusti, my hero kid, is on the board at Encuentro, that would be another place to get involved and be with undocumented people here in our city and learn and get involved and do what can be done.
Thank you. It strikes me that almost all of us in this room have spent our lives trying to work in some way for social justice. At the moment, we're not that much closer. And in fact, things are a hell of a lot worse than I thought they would be 50 years on or 60 years on since I started. What I do notice, though, is that people with really stupid ideas, childlike, things like capitalism will solve, the free market will solve all problems, which is obviously not true. Or Jesus sent Donald Trump as his emissary to save unborn babies. This is ridiculous, absurd thinking. But these people were smart enough to know that their goal could be accomplished by taking over the party closest to them and use that as a mechanism to take over the government, not just the federal government, but a majority of state governments. They're smart enough to do that. Now, we, on the other hand, are incredibly smart people. Probably the IQ, the average IQ here is well off the charts. We're out with no power whatsoever. I don't understand this. I don't understand where we went wrong, and these people who are obviously unintelligent went right. They went for power. Now I have another question which bothers me just as much. In New Mexico, there are thousands and thousands of smart young professionals in the helping professions. Law, medicine, education, social work. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people involved full-time in nonprofits. But it has not occurred to almost any of these people that whatever they're devoting their lives to could be magnified by enormous orders of magnitude if the government were to take on the policies and could do the programs that they are devoting their lives to. Very few of these people, I'm going to end now, have devoted their lives to a strategy for power, which happens to be the exact same strategy that the imbeciles of the far right used, which is take over the party closest to us in order to take over the government. This paradox, I don't understand it. It drives me nuts. They gave us a model, and none of us, hardly any of us, and I tried within the Democratic Party, very, very few of these creative young professionals are in the Democratic Party, believe me. It's sclerotic, it's a shell, and every election has to be a battle, and we get a liberal like Tim Keller, and then we get a conservative city council. MAGA is making, we just don't have a political strategy. So why did we fail so badly?
Mark, I love you. I feel your pain every day. I have 4. Yes, exactly.
Have we learned nothing?
I think would you and I be black in the 40s, 50s, and then Dr. King came, that same frustration. Why the hell is this country so damn racist? People organized, got out in the streets, got arrested. Young people at the university here got arrested. My kid Eustace, good friend, was one of those who was arrested. It's just a matter of working at it and doing what we can do. I don't want to blame you, me, our generation. I have these 4 MAGA neighbors of mine, and I've been knocked over by one of them and her dog, and the cop was called because of another issue. So I share in our little village of 300 people your frustration too. Again, I think it goes back to teaching where we can, who we can, and having some hope. I know it's difficult. I feel that too. Demetria?
You need a mic.
Wait, Myra, wait for a mic.
This was the same conversation in the 80s. Do you remember it? I was in Dallas, Texas. The answer to the question is that people who are more liberal thinking are more tolerant. So we have to define maybe our boundaries and be willing to speak to people who do believe differently and work at it really hard, from the very basic things we can find in common until the differences appear and we can begin to discuss them. But if we start talking about the differences right away, we're never going to get there. So, but we have to be less tolerant and more willing, I think.
You don't send missionaries to the already converted.
Right.
Okay? You have to be willing
Right.
to go out and teach. Their approach to power was fundamentally organic. It's organic. A very organic approach. Wait a second. Okay. My point is that their approach to power was fundamentally organic. If you look at how a fungus spreads. It's blown into the air and it finds a spot with no other fungus, and it grows and develops and spreads. They seeded the country. They seeded rural communities with people specifically to educate and inculcate to their views. And if you have uneducated people, people with only Fox News or Sinclair, if they don't have the ability to acquire a broad view, they're going to be impressed. They're going to have their fears played on. I don't get your point. The point is that's how they succeeded. You're wondering why we failed. That's how they.
Well, yeah, thank you. Oh.
Can meet out in the hall and hash it out. You both have made very important points. Laura.
I just want to recommend a movie to people. The movie's called No in Spanish, with Gael Garcia Bernal, and it's about Chile towards the end of the Pinochet dictatorship. They were in the throes of it, and it was horrible. You know, women, children, men were being kidnapped from their homes, tortured. It was horrific. It was probably one of the worst dictatorships in the world, and it went on for many years. And so Pinochet was pressured to have an election, and all of these opposition parties were like, we have to, and he allowed them to have commercials. He had to allow commercials, but the commercial time was between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning for the opposition. The opposition got together and like, we're going to talk about the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo and the tortures and people being thrown out of airplanes. And they hired this marketing guy, and he goes, I can't sell that. That's fear, and that's dread, and that's what everybody's been living with. And I can't get people to go to the polls. I can't sell that. I can sell margarine, I can sell toilet paper, but I can't sell that. And so he proposed doing positive commercials, funny commercials that made fun of the dictatorship and had people smiling and laughing, and they had no polls. The only reason they knew they were gaining was there were buttons for yes and no was against the regime. And they had the election, and no won. And the generals, and they have footage of this, the generals went in to the administrative palace and they told the Pinochet, you're out. There's a plane waiting on the tarmac, and they took him out. So I think when we're despondent, we're tired, a movie like that, and Demetria's novel, Mother Tongue, about those times, that's another it's a romance, it's a wonderful novel, it's very realistic about what was going on. It's good to turn to the arts.
Thank you. As I'm taking the mic to the next person, I'm going to just let you know that Ruben Garcia is here from Annunciation House. I'm delighted to have him with us tonight. Thank you, Ruben. And he brought us bumper stickers that say, resist, be sanctuary. So I'll just be passing them around as the questions continue.
Thank you so much. So I just want to offer a little bit of hope. I am a pastor for Luther House at the University of New Mexico. I was strongly involved in the Palestinian solidarity movement. And I want to assure you that young people are super active. They're so brave. We hung out with and in solidarity with, a core group of like 50 students who really sacrificed for the movement and were willing not only to be arrested, but also they knew that they would be brutalized during that arrest. They organize differently than we did. They organize differently than you did. We need to make those connections. This room is full of legacies. I am beyond excited to help make those connections. I can do some of that work. I want to connect with many of you. But we also have to understand they organize differently. They have different values, and we can learn from them as well. But the things that we saw and the things that we continue to see on campuses and young people it is phenomenal. They're living your legacy that you all are part of. And the groups that are in Albuquerque, we have tons of groups that young people are phenomenal in. So I just want to offer that hope that our organizing looks more like a ragtag group of people following a healer called The Way, or base communities. It may not look super organized, but it's a much different way to change the world.
Thank you, Rhonda.
I almost fell off the stage when I heard that Ruben Garcia is here from Annunciation House. If anyone has had any reason on earth to lose hope year after year after year, and who's doing the work, it's Ruben. So we're turning the mic over to him.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. I actually drove up here primarily to just express gratitude to Demetria and Glenn for, at one moment many years ago, making a decision about where they wanted to stand. It wasn't a decision that was based because there were hundreds of people behind them, supporting them, and et cetera. It was a decision that came from conscience saying, this is something that we need to do. You know, for many of us, not all, but for many of us, we gather in a sanctuary. It's a place of worship. It's a place where people gather. It's a place where people acknowledge that the person that they continue to want to be with and to follow is a person that ultimately ended up on a wooden cross. And our model wasn't particularly successful on earth. I've been under the belief that the reason that Jesus chose 12 men as disciples and didn't include any women is because Jesus was afraid that when the end times came, there wasn't going to be any men in heaven. And he thought, perhaps this way I can at least have a couple of men up there. And if you notice, when he was on the cross, none of the men were around. The ones that were standing at the foot of the cross were all women. Okay? So I came to simply say thank you to these two people for a decision that they made many years ago that then served to provide witness to many people in many different places to make decisions based on conscience. We have to remember that when we make a decision based on conscience, we are making a decision in the solitude of our own identity. I've been at this now going on 47 years, and there have been times when there's been a lot of people at Annunciation House, and there have been other times when there's been almost no one. And, you know, I asked God, just this morning I was having a conversation with several volunteers, and I say to them, you know, God's pretty good at letting me know where I fall short. But I said to them, you know, I also let God know where God has fallen short. You know, I let God know when he's blown it a little bit. And I say, I kind of like to have that kind of a God. And so there are moments where there aren't going to be a lot of people. And we go back to that fundamental decision of conscience. Who am I? What am I called to do? And we make decisions that are based on fundamentally who we are. Each one of you is here this evening because there's something inside of you that lives. There is a flame that continues to burn, and you've nurtured it and you've protected it. And you know in your life that there have been very windy moments when you've really had to protect that little flame inside of you. But here you are, and you have no idea, what tomorrow is going to look like. And I appreciate so much you're talking about the young people, and you're very, very correct. So I drove up here primarily to just want to let Demetria, let Glenn know that their light continues to burn, to allow it to continue to burn. Don't worry about whether you've got 10,000 people or 500 people or 5 people. Just let it burn. Let it burn. Let it burn. So it's a delight to be with you, okay? And I know that many of you have things to say, and I want to make sure to let people say that. But it's a delight to be with you this evening. Thank you.
Anybody want to ask the last question? Okay.
Hi. Actually, this is a question for Ruben, if that is okay. I would like for you to please give us an update on the lawsuit situation, like where are you now?
Thank you. One of the reasons I came up is because I wanted to be here with these two wonderful people. My second reason is if things don't go very well with the Attorney General of Texas, I want you to know that I really like chocolate chip cookies, so that the care packages you send me in jail, they'll be chocolate chip cookies, okay? So keep that in mind. We got a very favorable ruling on the district court level where Judge Francisco Dominguez dismissed the case of the Attorney General. And we felt that we were going to succeed at the district court level, but we also knew that the Attorney General wasn't going to leave it there, that the Attorney General was going to appeal it. And that's exactly what the Attorney General has announced, that the Attorney General is going to appeal it directly to the Supreme Court of Texas. So the next step is now going to be before the Supreme Court of Texas, and we're waiting for that appeal to actually be filed, and then we'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court of Texas decides in regards to our specific situation. I want you to know that the Attorney General has now gone after 3 additional hospitality sites along the border. One of them that is very interesting is they're going after Catholic Charities in Brownsville. That's Sister Norman Pimentel. And the thing that's very interesting about that is that they're taking on directly the Catholic Church, because Catholic Charities in Brownsville is a direct ministry of the Diocese of Brownsville, whereas Annunciation House is independently incorporated. So we are included in the Catholic directory, but we are not a direct ministry of the Catholic Diocese of El Paso. So it's just to let you know he's expanding his reach. The fundamental issue is that Annunciation House has for many years provided hospitality to undocumented people. And that's really the issue, that they want to call that trafficking, smuggling. They want to call our houses stash houses, etc. And we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to do what we feel we've been asked to do, that God's asked us to do this, and so we're going to continue to do that. For any of you that are interested and you've got a couple of free weeks, come on down and volunteer with us for 2-3 weeks at a time. We'd love to have you. We'll give you a place to stay, and we'll really work you out, okay? So that's where we're at, waiting for the Supreme Court to receive the appeal and then waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision. That's where we're at, okay?
All right, the last question.
Ruben, I just wanted to know, are there actual people staying at Annunciation House, or has this action closed, you know, the access for people to come in and stay with you?
People are still staying at Annunciation House, and they're also staying at, we operate Casa Rita Steinhagen, and we have people at Casa Rita. We have Casa Papa Francisco, which is another one of our houses, and we have people there. So we're fully operational. The numbers are down because of the immense amount of enforcement that Mexico is undertaking throughout Mexico. So the numbers are low. President Biden's executive order to shut down the border when numbers go beyond a certain level. So the numbers are low, but our houses are operational. Yeah, they are. That's why, let me know when you plan to come down, okay?
Yeah, if you've not been to Annunciation House, I highly recommend. It's a powerful place. I am so grateful to Demetria Martinez and Glenn Thamert for your incredible activism again, and you're sharing your stories tonight. I'm grateful that Ruben drove up from El Paso to be here with us. And I'm grateful for all of you to be in a room of activists, of people who are deeply committed to this work and to making a world where all people are embraced and welcome because of who they are. So thank you all for being here. We do have Demetria's books out in the fellowship hall, and it is cooler out there. And we want to thank Lynn Gottlieb for being with us. Oh, there's some in here as well? Oh, we have, and Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb just has released a new book as well that is available. So yes, and she was talking to me about a really cool project that we're looking at maybe in the fall related to Churches for Ceasefire. So I'm super excited about that. So keep your eyes and ears open for more opportunities to be involved in doing the right thing in the world. My friends, please go in peace and know that you are loved.